cool. Joining from the Netherlands, so visual description before I start sharing my slides, middle-aged Latina woman wearing glasses with reddish purple hair, intentionally wearing a Keep Calm t-shirt and seated in front of a bookcase. So let's get started. Share my screen. There we go. Excellent. All right, so just a bit about me so that you also understand how I approach digital. So for the first 18 years or so of my career, I've spent as both a practitioner participating in and leading large-scale digital transformations across highly regulated industries and companies like Aetna Health Insurance, Fidelity Investments, Salesforce, Radian6, and I cut my teeth in the U.S. Department of Defense. So I understand regulated industry, and I understand working within constraints. Now, if it might seem like I've worked on projects that have large teams or large budgets, let me clarify, that has not always been the case. In many instances, especially in the beginning, in each and every single one of those positions and every single one of those organizations, it started out with me, myself, and my multiple personalities creating and making a case for change and working through digital transformation in a very iterative way, sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing spectacularly. Throughout the same period that I was within these organizations, I was also in school, either as a student, completing 2 master's degrees, PhD, going to law school, all within the realm of better understanding communication and collaboration as enabled by digital, as well as being a teacher. You know, how I could learn more about theory and be able to test that theory in real-time applications. So in 2018, I left the private sector to move into working primarily with cultural and heritage organizations. And I started off by, as an independent researcher and consultant. And I really wanted to move into this sector because I wanted to do more than contribute to the bottom line. I'm also, since 2018, a researcher as part of the 1x1 project, which many of you may be familiar with. I was working on this project when I was based in the UK, as well as now when I'm based in the Netherlands. 1x1 is a multi-partner international initiative led by the University of Leicester School of Museum Studies, bringing together cultural organizations, policymakers, academics, professional bodies, support agencies, and communities of practice to build digitally confident museums. Now, before I begin, one question that I always get is, what is the difference between digital work in the private sector and that of cultural and heritage organizations? And while I'm sure a lot of you in the audience can rattle, a list of differences, I actually find that there's more in common. Why? Because we're dealing with humans working with other humans, and what it means to grapple with and harness the power of community to exact right-sized change. Now, I think we can all agree that digital is important. It's important for us to understand how we make sense of digital, how we manage digital, how we create digital within our own organization contexts and conditions. What's true is that digital is permeating every single role and responsibility across our organizations. Just think about how we communicate and collaborate, the various different types of technologies, whether they be digital first, like email or text or a forum-based message system, or digitally augmented, like we're gathered here today, where we're aided by voice and video. What's true is that we are actively shaping and being shaped by digital simultaneously. And even when we think that we aren't making any type of change or concerted effort when it comes to digital, that's actually not the case, because digital, the way in which we are interacting with or being shaped by digital is continuous. There is nothing static. Just think about, even if you haven't changed a specific system in eons, you're still coming up with different workarounds in how to use it, or different applications, or how it interfaces with other elements of your digital ecosystem. I think we often get scared by digital in thinking about the complexity of how digital is shaping us, and we are shaping digital as individuals, departments, organizations, collectives. And I think that we often confuse complexity with being complicated. We can't engineer the complexity out of the systems that we exist in. We are by nature navigating highly complex systems. What we can do is we can make it less complicated to navigate and to make sense of. In the words of my organizational design and development colleague, Dr. Sharon Varney, she states, if we focus on whether change should be planned or emergent, we are likely to miss how change is both planned and emergent. Wrong direction there. So what do we need to consider before we start thinking about the different skills and abilities that will enable us to enact the type of intentional change that we're talking about today? So first, we need to understand that we cannot exercise digital skills without having an understanding of how they align to our strategic goals and objectives. We can't better understand, train, perform, develop digital skills without having that understanding of the emotionality that is influencing those different efforts. We need to be able to combine our business and cognitive skills with emotional skills that give greater nuance or clarity and a robustness to our digital skills. Meaning, it's not simply just answering, a tweet. It's knowing how we can read between the lines. Reading is the new listening when it comes to digital. We have to figure out different ways in which we interpret and understand digital language, whether it's happening in a digital first or a digitally augmented environment. In a survey of 1,500 executives across 90 different countries, a survey that was a set of research that was just published recently in the MIT Management Sloan, the trait of adaptability was one of the most important leadership qualities, alongside curiosity, creativity, and comfort with ambiguity when it came to digital, when leading in a digital age. We need to think beyond what's technically possible and really hone in on what are the needs, challenges, and desires of our workforce and the communities that we serve. We need to even push beyond that and start asking, is it morally, ethically, or sustainably the right direction, the right use, and the right technology? How is digital enabling or furthering our strategic goals and objectives? So this leads us to the Take Care to Become approach. And as I stated, I'm a product of the Department of Defense, so I am a fan of a good acronym. We're going to be focused on the COM aspect of this particular framework, but the battle scars that I've acquired, both as a practitioner, leader, student, now researcher, has led me to the formation of the Take Care to Become approach. It's a life-centered framework to develop fit-for-purpose digital mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets to rethink new ways of working, reimagine digital ecosystems, and reframe digital practices and processes. So over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to introduce you to the COM aspect of the framework. So before we can collaborate, we need to first learn how to communicate. When we're talking about digital efforts, and especially thinking about our own specific organizational contexts or conditions, when we talk about innovation and transformation, it's not necessarily those big sector wins where you have to be the shiny example of what digital looks and feels like. Something transformative or innovative for your organization might be being able to digitize workflows. It might be enabling a customer relationship management database. It could be something small that has a massive impact for your internal and external communities. And we have to move beyond, to achieve that communication and collaboration, we have to move beyond cooperation and really think about how we are enabling the skills, the abilities, the talents of our communities, both internally and externally. And so what does this mean? This means we really need to live into our commitment. Commitment comes before communication and collaboration. We need to think about how our aspirations, how our values are being lived in throughout our digital work, throughout our digital interactions, throughout our digital planning and processes. We need to think about how we're accountable to ourselves and to our communities in the digital space. We need to think about those unintended and intended consequences, and to establish an environment that enables communication and collaboration. We need to have some boundaries or some agreements about how we work, the rules of engagement inside and outside for how we handle and enable healthy conflict and ensure that multiple perspectives are considered. These rules help preserve the ability to collaborate, to learn through trial and error, and to really integrate what we learn through the process into the next round of decision making. We need to lead by being open and transparent. Now, that doesn't mean we have to share everything under the sun. What it does mean is we need to act as a guide. We need to be able to showcase why and how decisions are being made. We need to move beyond if only we had X. We have to work with what we have. One of the things that I find when walking into any organization is one of the things hindering communication and collaboration, or really upsetting the organization and creating levels of tension or unhealthy conflict, is because there is no documented organizational memory. The insight and awareness of what has come before and what exists. How were those decisions made? Why did we choose to bring in this technology? What's the process for using this technology? What are the right practices? What are the governing principles of how we manage, use, understand, and create using this tool, platform, or system? So we have to develop some common ground before we can communicate and collaborate. And that's done by establishing some constraints. The next aspect of the Care to Be Calm framework is moving from being able to adapt to change and really flexing our anticipatory muscles or skills. Now, to do that, we don't necessarily always need a vision. Innovation doesn't come from a vision first approach. We don't always necessarily know what is going to happen. But if we are rallying around in community with some type of common purpose, that is helping us progress together. So purpose, not the leader, not authority or power, is what creates and animates community efforts. There's this false notion that ideas and innovation just spring fully formed from an individual's mind, and that's not so. It's really a group effort, a team sport. It's iterative, it's data informed. And when we're acting as a community to enact this particular change, it's more like a jazz band. We've got some constraints, but we're improvising. We're playing off of each other's beats. We're trying to figure out, who has this particular skill? How do we amplify that? How do we amplify that strength? How do we recognize this particular weakness and level out? We need to also understand that we might have these big, wonderful, audacious, hairy goals that are part of our purpose, but we have to learn by doing, and how we're learning from each other's beats means that we think big and act small. How do we take those iterative efforts? How do we work? How do we plan? How do we review together in sprints? How do we work smarter, not harder? So being able to work in that type of community requires creative agility, creative abrasion, and creative resolution. So what does that mean? That means creative agility. It's that organizational ability to test and refine ideas in quick experiments, reflect and then adjust, right? You keep learning, you keep trying and seeing what works, what doesn't work. Creative resolution is the organizational ability to be able to learn from those insights, to learn from that trial and error, and be able to impact our decision-making processes as we move forward. Creative resolution is when we move beyond groupthink, we move beyond a binary decision where we have to choose between A or B. And we look at the multiple solutions or the multiple perspectives that are part of this community and change effort. And we think about, how can we think of and combine multiple solutions, multiple perspectives? So leaders should be asking multiple questions. They should be probing, not providing all of the answers. If we were providing all of the answers, why would we need this particular group effort and this type of process of exploration? So a leader's role is to ask questions like, what about, what if, when, why? Encourage individuals and groups to really test ideas and reflect on what they're learning, and being more rigorous about the analysis and the collection of data. And it really helps us to, as leaders, not everybody might see the entire system. So we need to be able to see that entire system and make sense of that system for all of the different players that are involved. And this means that we need to let go of that heroic savior complex of leadership, where we need to embrace collective leadership and let go of command and control models. One of the things that creates a high sense of tension and conflict, and not the healthy kind, because tension and conflict are good. We don't want to engineer those out, because then we end up with stale ideas that are not robust or diverse in their perspectives. But one of the things that I find is that we have little clarity on who is responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted and informed, and how those roles change over time at multiple phases and stages of our process, of our project. So it's really thinking about how that innovation or that renovation goes beyond an individual effort or skill. We have discussions on a regular basis about, what does done look like? What does success look like? Are we clear on what that done looks like from one aspect of the project to the next? Now, a leader's job isn't necessarily to always have the answers and to be able to say, you know what, I don't have the answers. Let's figure out what multiple answers or multiple perspectives we need. It's also not to shut down the conversation and move to one solution, one area of thinking, while not keeping those various options on the table throughout the duration of the project or the effort. It's also ensuring that those multiple voices, that those unheard voices, those dissenting voices are having a seat at the table or a part of the process as you move forward with any digital effort. And last, but definitely not least, we need to be more mindful in our approach to digital. This means we have to really flex our empathetic skills. We move at the speed of trust. It's not how great our practices and processes or our digital ecosystem is. It's about what humans do and act and form a relationship with one another. So what does this mean for us? This means we need to establish some type of rhythm and develop rituals for us to plan, for us to review and showcase our work, to have retrospectives where we are inviting people in at consistent frequent meetings or exchanges of ideas, soliciting that feedback so that we can be really reflective and build something or create something or analyze something so that we're capturing those multiple perspectives, we're capturing those multiple views. What's important to understand about having a more mindful approach to digital is that possible solutions, as I said, don't just spring from thin air. They come from a series of sparks, how a group plays off of one another, how their contribution, one individual's contribution, is inspiring another individual or group's contribution. Now, we should be engineering creative abrasion into our digital work. Now, what does that mean? That means that we are including and actively spearheading, enabling ongoing discussion, evaluation, critical comparison of ideas. This is not to be confused with brainstorming, folks. Brainstorming is when we, create a bunch of ideas and we don't say anything critical. Creative abrasion, on the other hand, is supported by thoughtful confrontation, thoughtful consideration, and that ongoing discussion, that ongoing discourse. And that's why it only works if you set the stage for your community to really understand and live into their values, understand and progress with purpose, and be able to ensure that they can handle conflict within the group, within the community. And they use that conflict not as a barrier to change, but enacting change. It's a leader's role to really provide that purpose, those values, those rules of engagement, to set the scene for how people engage with one another so that they can bring their different skills, their different knowledge, their working styles and preferences in different ways in which they gather and process information or assimilate ideas. How might you be able to enact or enable that context for taking a more calm, reflective approach to digital? For your convenience, I have given you this little bit.ly link, Calm Prompts, that has all the different types of questions that I usually use when working with an organization to think through all of those elements of the Care to Be Calm framework. I really appreciate your time today, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A.